I watched her fingertips brush against his arm, and in that small moment, I knew. I had already lost her heart. Betrayal doesn't always begin in the bedroom. Sometimes, it starts with silence at the dinner table, long stares out the window, and a smile that no longer belongs to you. In this heartbreaking and deeply human story, I share how my wife, my high school sweetheart and the mother of our children, slipped away into the arms of another man. Not for lust, but for something far more dangerous, escape. To all my amazing subscribers, thank you for standing with me. If you haven't yet, hit that notification bell so you never miss these real, raw life stories. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to support this channel. It means more than you know. Let's keep bringing inspiring and dramatic stories to life. My name is Ryan Whitaker, and this story isn't easy for me to tell. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, a quiet, peaceful place tucked in the mountains. You'd think stories like mine only happen in big cities where people come and go without knowing their neighbor's name. But the truth is, heartbreak finds you no matter where you are. I'm 42 years old. I've worked in real estate since I was in my mid-20s. I've never been the flashy type. Just a man who tried to do the right thing, pay the bills, raise my kids, and be a decent husband. For 17 years, I was married to Claire. She was my high school sweetheart, the one who used to write little hearts next to my name on her notebook. She had a quiet smile, the kind that never needed to say much, because her eyes always did the talking. We built a life together. A home with a white fence, 2 kids, Abby and Michael, and a routine that became our rhythm. Every morning, she'd make coffee. I'd pour cereal for the kids. She'd do the drop-off. I'd head to work. We weren't perfect, but I always believed we were solid. You know what I mean. Until one day. I looked at her across the breakfast table, and it hit me. She wasn't there. Oh, her body was there, her hands holding a mug, her hair tied back the same way she always wore it. But her eyes were gone. Staring off into a distance I couldn't reach. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Claire had always carried more than she let on. Raising 2 kids, managing the house, cooking meals, checking homework. It's easy to overlook how invisible a woman can start to feel when she's the one doing everything quietly in the background. I asked her once if she was okay. She smiled. Not the real kind. The kind people wear when they're trying to keep from breaking. Yeah. Just tired, she said. We all say that. But tired can mean 1,000 different things. That night, I stayed up after she went to bed. I sat in the living room alone, staring at the TV, not watching anything. Something inside me felt off. I didn't know what it was at the time, just a restlessness in my chest. I thought. Maybe I should take her on a trip. Maybe we need a weekend away, just the 2 of us. But I never booked it. Life got in the way. Work, the kids, bills, excuses dressed up as responsibilities. Weeks went by. Then months. And Claire began spending more time out of the house. She started volunteering at the local public library on Mondays and Thursdays. Said she needed something for herself. I supported it. I really did. I even told her, good. You deserve something of your own. But as time passed, something changed in her. She started dressing a little differently, nothing dramatic, just, more intentional. Hair down more often. A bit of lip gloss. She used to rush out the door in sweatshirts and jeans, but now she looked like someone who was meeting someone. I noticed it. I just didn't say anything. Because when you trust someone completely, you don't jump to conclusions. And because part of me didn't want to believe that I could be losing her right in front of me. Then came the nights when she'd come home late. Always with a reason. Lost track of time shelving books. Had a talk with one of the librarians about the summer program. Stopped at the grocery store. She was never defensive. Never guilty. Just, distant. Calm, even. That's what made it harder to suspect anything. She wasn't acting like someone cheating on her husband, she was acting like someone who had already left. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. We still shared a bed, but she stopped resting her leg over mine like she used to. Her touch became mechanical, like I was just there, not someone she felt. Still, I kept brushing it off. Until one Friday evening, I came home early from work. The kids were at a friend's sleepover. I thought maybe Claire and I could have dinner together, talk, reconnect. When I opened the front door, the house was quiet. Her car was outside, so I called out. No answer. Then I heard her voice, low and soft, coming from the guest room. I walked toward it, and my steps slowed when I realized she wasn't alone. The door was cracked open just enough. And I saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing into her phone, her voice tender, a version of her I hadn't heard in months. She said his name. Dylan. I didn't go in. I didn't confront her. I backed away quietly and went back outside like I never came in at all. I sat in my truck and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. My hands were shaking. I didn't know who Dylan was. But I knew what I had just heard. And I knew that I was no longer the man she spoke to like that. The next morning, I woke up before Claire. I lay there beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. The sun peeked through the curtains, casting light across the bed we had shared for nearly 2 decades. And yet, it had never felt so unfamiliar. I should have asked her about Dylan. I should have told her I overheard that call. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to understand how we got here. What I had missed. What had broken. And most of all, who was Dylan Mercer? I wasn't the jealous type. Never had been. Claire had friends, male and female, and I trusted her. But this felt different. It wasn't just about another man. It was about the part of her she no longer brought home. So I started paying attention. That next Thursday, I left work early and drove by the Biltmore Public Library, where she volunteered. I parked across the street, watching through the windshield like some cliché detective in an old movie. And then I saw him. He came out first. Tall. Tan blazer. Slender frame. Maybe mid-30s. Clean cut, but not stiff. He had the kind of face that made people stop and listen. Even from a distance, you could tell he was comfortable in his own skin. The kind of man who didn't have to try hard to be noticed, he just was. Claire followed behind him about a minute later. She wasn't holding his arm or anything inappropriate. But they were walking closely. Too closely. She laughed at something he said, and then she touched his elbow as they reached the sidewalk. Not flirtatious. Just, familiar. They stood there for a moment. Not talking. Just looking at each other. And that's when my stomach dropped. Because that pause, that quiet stare between them, said more than words ever could. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about attraction in the usual way. It was something deeper. Recognition. Intimacy. Claire didn't look at me like that anymore. I ducked down in my seat as they parted ways. She walked to her car. He went the opposite direction, probably toward some nearby cafe or bookstore. I stayed there, heart racing, hands sweating on the steering wheel. I drove home that day not knowing whether I wanted to scream, cry, or throw up. That night at dinner, she acted like everything was normal. She talked to the kids about school, helped with dishes, asked if I wanted to watch a movie later. I said I had work to finish. I lied. Instead, I went to the garage and sat there in the dark, replaying every moment from the past 6 months. The signs had been there. I'd just been too blind, or too scared, to face them. A few days later, I finally got the courage to ask her a simple question. We were sitting outside on the back porch. The kids were at a sleepover again. Claire was reading a book. I was sipping a beer, pretending to scroll through my phone. "Hey," I said casually, "you've been spending a lot of time at the library lately. You making any new friends?" She looked up. Just for a second. Then, just as calmly, she said, "Yeah, a few. It's a nice place. I've gotten to know some of the regulars. There's a guy named Dylan, he's a writer, I think. Comes in a lot. Super smart. A little weird, but in a good way." She said it so easily. So naturally. As if he meant nothing at all. "Dylan, huh?" I nodded. "You talk to him much?" "A bit. Mostly about books and stuff. He's kind of interesting." "Why?" I shrugged. "No reason." That was the first time she lied to me. Because I could tell by her tone, by the way she kept her eyes on the horizon while she spoke, that there was more to it. And I realized something painful right then: Claire had already built an entire world that didn't include me. A week later, I found her journal. I wasn't proud of what I did. She had left it in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, underneath an old scarf. It wasn't locked. Just hidden enough to say, "Don't look unless you're ready for the truth." But I opened it anyway. I wish I hadn't. The entries were raw, emotional, full of self-doubt and longing. She wrote about feeling invisible, forgotten, like her life had become a shadow of who she once was. And then, she wrote about him. "Dylan listens. Not just with his ears, but with his whole body. I feel seen again. I feel like a woman again, not just a mother, not just a wife. He asks me questions Ryan stopped asking years ago." Another page. I'm scared. Not of falling for Dylan, but of what it means. What it says about how far Ryan and I have drifted apart. We haven't touched, physically, I mean, but emotionally. I'm already his. That broke me. Not the mention of another man. Not even the emotional affair. What shattered me, was that she was right. I had stopped asking. Stopped noticing. I had loved Claire like a routine. Like brushing my teeth. Like setting the alarm at night. Love had become maintenance. And she had simply gone searching for color in a world I helped paint gray. I closed the journal, placed it back exactly where I found it, and went to sit in the living room. I stared at our wedding photo on the wall. Claire in that ivory dress, her smile glowing, her eyes full of hope. And me, holding her hand like I'd never let go. But I had let go. Not in one big moment. But in 1,000 small ways over the years. And now, someone else was holding her heart. It was a Sunday morning when I finally asked her. Not shouted. Not accused. Just, asked. Claire was pouring coffee at the kitchen counter. The kids were still asleep upstairs. I had been sitting in silence at the table for almost 10 minutes, watching her move around the kitchen like nothing was wrong. She had this way of smiling over her shoulder when she knew I was watching. But this time, she didn't smile. Not once. She just poured the coffee, added her usual cream, and set the mug in front of me. I looked up at her and said quietly. "Claire, are you in love with him?" She froze. Not in a dramatic, soap opera kind of way. Just a stillness. Her fingers curled slightly around the edge of the counter. Her eyes looked toward the window, but not really at anything. And that silence, those first 5 seconds, told me everything. When she finally turned around, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know." That hurt more than a yes. I nodded, looking down at my coffee. My hands were shaking, but I tried to keep my voice calm. "I read your journal," I said. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, maybe get angry, but she didn't. She just stared at me with tired eyes. Eyes that had already decided the fight wasn't worth it. I wasn't looking for it, I continued. I just found it. And once I started reading, I couldn't stop. Claire sat across from me slowly. Her fingers tugged at the sleeves of her sweater. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just said the one thing I wasn't prepared for. I didn't mean for it to happen. It hit like a punch to the chest. I nodded again, more to keep myself steady than anything else. Did you sleep with him? She hesitated. Then she shook her head slowly. No, not yet. Not yet. The words landed like a hammer. It wasn't a denial. It was a warning. There was still time for her to go that far. And somewhere inside her, she was considering it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the mug across the room. But instead, I just asked. What do you want, Claire? That question hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible. She looked at me with tears building in her eyes, the first signs of emotion I'd seen in weeks. I want to feel alive again, she said. I want to be seen. I want someone to ask me how I'm doing and actually wait for the answer. I want to remember what it felt like to be more than someone's wife or someone's mom or someone keeping the house from falling apart. Her voice cracked. I want to feel like I matter again, Ryan. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt ashamed. Because she wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped trying. Not because I didn't love her, but because I thought marriage meant we'd always be fine as long as we just kept showing up. Paying the bills. Tucking the kids in. Watching a show at night. Saying I love you out of habit instead of intention. I had loved Claire, yes. But I had stopped making her feel loved. I get it, I said finally. But Claire, you should have come to me. Not him. I tried, she whispered. So many times. You were always working. Or tired. Or distracted. And after a while, I stopped trying because I thought you stopped caring. Her face crumbled then. She started crying, not loudly, but deeply. Quiet tears she had probably been holding in for months. I reached across the table and took her hand. She flinched. That one motion, it said so much. She didn't pull away. But she didn't lean in either. It was like my touch confused her. Like part of her wanted to believe we could still fix this, and part of her had already left. We sat like that for what felt like forever. And then I said the hardest thing I've ever said. Do you love me anymore? Claire didn't answer right away. She looked down at our hands, mine trembling, hers cold, and then she said, I love what we were. I love what we built. I love our kids. But I don't know if I love us the way I used to. There it was. The moment everything changed. She didn't yell. She didn't cheat. She didn't storm out or slam a door. She just told the truth. And it shattered me. That night, we slept in separate rooms. For the first time since our honeymoon, we didn't say goodnight. We didn't kiss. We didn't check on the kids together. We just went to bed as two people who used to know everything about each other, and now barely knew what to say. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how marriages really died. Not with a fight, but with quiet confessions and 1,000 unspoken things. I kept thinking about Dylan. What did he have that I didn't? More charm. More time. More energy. Or maybe it wasn't about him at all. Maybe he was just the first person who noticed that Claire was fading, and tried to pull her back into the light. A few days later, Claire packed a weekend bag and said she needed space. She didn't tell me where she was going. I didn't ask. Maybe I didn't want to know. The kids stayed with me. They knew something was off, but they were too young to understand the full truth. And I was just trying to breathe. Trying to hold myself together. Trying to figure out whether I should fight for the woman who might already belong to someone else. Claire was gone for 3 days. 3 long, hollow days. I kept things as normal as possible for the kids. Made them breakfast. Took them to school. Helped with homework. Brushed their teeth. But behind every smile, behind every word I spoke, there was a constant ache in my chest. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know who she was with. And I didn't ask. Because deep down, I already knew. On the 3rd night, I was sitting alone on the porch with a glass of bourbon when her headlights finally lit up the driveway. I stayed seated as she got out of the car, slowly walked up the steps, and stood in front of me. She didn't look tired. She looked different. Like something inside her had shifted. She didn't speak at first. Just sat down on the porch swing across from me, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. It was chilly, but not enough to explain the way she was shivering. I stared at her for a long moment. Then asked the question I had dreaded since the moment she left. "Did you sleep with him?" Claire looked away. The silence that followed was so thick, I thought I might choke on it. And then she said, softly, "Yes." There was no rage inside me. No explosion. Just silence. Cold and sharp. "I didn't plan to," she added quickly. It happened." I nodded. "That's usually how it happens." She began to cry. It wasn't just about the sex, Ryan. It was about feeling wanted. Desired. I forgot what that felt like. I let her speak. I let her cry. But inside me, something was breaking wide open. I looked at her and said the hardest thing I've ever had to say. "I don't know how to come back from this." Claire looked up at me with red eyes. "I know." She didn't beg. She didn't plead. Maybe she was too ashamed. Or maybe she didn't believe I had it in me to forgive her. Truth was, I didn't know either. That night, she slept in the guest room again. I laid awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, replaying everything. The smiles she gave me that weren't real. The nights she came home late. The way she flinched when I touched her. It was like I was looking back on a different woman than the one I had married. But here's the thing that crushed me most, part of me still loved her. I didn't want to. I wanted to shut the door. Walk away. Be done. But love isn't something you turn off like a light switch. It lingers. It digs into your ribs and doesn't let go, even when you beg it to. A week passed. She stayed in the guest room. We spoke only about the kids, and even that was cold and clipped. We were two strangers playing house. One evening, after the kids had gone to sleep, she came into the living room and sat across from me. "I ended it," she said quietly. I didn't respond. I told him it was wrong. That I needed to try to fix things here. I still didn't speak. I just stared at her like I was trying to read the truth behind her words. "I know you probably hate me," she said, voice shaking. "And maybe I deserve that. But I don't want to throw everything away, Ryan. I don't want to lose this family." My throat felt tight. "Then why didn't you protect it?" Her eyes welled up again. "Because I was broken. And I didn't know how to tell you." I stood up and walked toward the window. I couldn't look at her anymore. "You could have told me anything," I said. "You could have screamed. Fought. Left. But cheating? You made a choice that can't be undone." "I know," she whispered. We stood there in silence. Two people who had once promised each other forever. Now standing in the ruins of trust and love. Finally, I said, "I need time. And space." Claire nodded, wiping her face. "I'll go stay with my sister for a while." She packed the next morning, kissed the kids goodbye, and walked out the door without asking me to stop her. And I didn't. The days after she left were the quietest of my life. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like walking through a house that used to be filled with music and now echoes with absence. I kept busy. Work. Kids. Dishes. Laundry. Repetition. But at night, when the world went still, the weight of everything came crashing down. I kept thinking about the first time I saw Claire in college. Her laugh. The freckles on her shoulders. The way she leaned into me when she was tired. I wondered when that version of us had disappeared. Was it when the first baby came, and sleep vanished? Was it when we stopped going on dates? Or was it when we both started believing that marriage was supposed to get dull with time? I didn't know. All I knew was that we were standing at a cliff's edge. And neither of us knew whether to jump or walk away. One night, about a week after she left, I found something on my nightstand. It was a letter. Folded in half. No envelope. Just my name written in her handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Then read. "Ryan. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't if the roles were reversed. But I want you to know that I regret what I did every single day. Not just the night with Dylan, but the months before that, when I stopped talking to you, when I started pulling away. I let something grow in the dark because I was too afraid to shine a light on what we'd become. I still love you. Maybe not in the same way we used to love. But in the kind of way that hopes. There's something still worth saving. If you ever feel the same, I'll be here. Claire." I read it twice. Then again. And I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there holding the letter in my hand, not knowing whether it was the beginning of something new, or the end of everything we once had. I stared at Claire's letter for hours. Folded it. Unfolded it. Read it again, until the words weren't just ink on paper anymore, they were pieces of her pain. Her shame. Her plea for something more than just closure. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. A part of me longed to be done with it. To slam the door shut on everything that hurt. But another part, deep, stubborn, maybe even foolish, still believed in what we used to be. I didn't respond to the letter right away. I needed space. I needed clarity. And more than anything, I needed to know who I was without her. The kids kept me grounded. Without them, I might have collapsed. I remember one night, my daughter climbed into my lap and asked, "Is Mommy ever coming home?" I looked into her big blue eyes, so much like her mother's, and said the only thing I could. "I don't know, baby. But if she does, it'll be because we both believe in something worth coming home to." She didn't fully understand. But she hugged me tight, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. A few weeks passed. Claire stayed at her sister's house. We texted sometimes, mostly about the kids. But I could feel a quiet change in her tone. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't begging. She was giving me time. And that, strangely enough, mattered more than any apology she could have given. One Sunday morning, I dropped the kids off with Claire for the afternoon. When I came back to pick them up, she was waiting outside with a cup of coffee in her hands. "I didn't know if you'd want to come in," she said gently. I looked at her for a long moment. Her face was tired, but softer. Like she'd been doing some healing of her own. "I'll come in," I said. We talked in the living room while the kids played in the yard. It was awkward at first. Quiet. Careful. But eventually, something loosened. She told me she'd started therapy. She said she'd stopped talking to Dylan completely, blocked him, deleted everything. She told me she still didn't expect me to forgive her, but that she was learning how to forgive herself. I was selfish, she said, voice shaking. But more than that, I was lost. And I never gave you the chance to see how far I was slipping. I nodded slowly. And I never gave you a reason to tell me. That was hard to admit. We were both guilty. In different ways. But still guilty. There's a line I heard once: most marriages don't end in explosions. They die quietly, from silence and distance. That was us. We didn't fall apart overnight. We drifted, until she found someone in the space where I used to be. In the weeks that followed, we talked more. Not about getting back together, not yet, but about everything that had been broken. We met with a marriage counselor. We talked about resentment, routine, intimacy, anger. No more pretending. It was messy. Raw. Sometimes unbearable. But it was real. And that was something we hadn't had in a long, long time. One evening, we stood outside the house after I'd dropped off the kids. Claire looked at me and asked, "Do you think there's anything left between us to save?" I looked back at her. Thought of our first kiss, 17 years ago. The night we danced barefoot in the kitchen. The time she cried when we brought our son home from the hospital. Then I thought of the night she told me the truth. The silence that followed. The weight we'd both carried. "I think," I said slowly, "there's something worth trying for." She didn't cry. She didn't fall into my arms. She just nodded, like that answer meant everything. And it did. We took things slow. Weeks turned into months. She moved back in. First into the guest room, then eventually back into our bedroom. We had setbacks. Fights. Cold nights. Doubts. But we kept showing up. We kept choosing each other. That, more than anything, was the secret to rebuilding, choosing love again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. It's been over a year now. People ask me if I truly forgave her. Here's the truth. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 little decisions. It's making space for healing. It's choosing compassion when anger feels easier. It's looking at someone who broke you, and choosing not to break them back. Claire and I still go to counseling. We go on dates. We talk. Really talk. Sometimes we still fight. But we fight like people who are trying to stay, not escape. We're not perfect. But we're still here. And sometimes, still here is more powerful than anything else. Looking back now, I realize something. Infidelity didn't destroy our marriage. Silence did. Distance did. The affair was just the final symptom of something that had been dying slowly inside us. But we learned. And now we fight for connection. For closeness. For honesty. It's not the same marriage we had before. In some ways, it's better. Because this time, we know how easily it can fall apart. And we've learned just how much it's worth saving.